there's a renewal of community because God doesn't start with a church. God doesn't start with a nation. He doesn't start with a society. He starts with a man and a woman. God clearly had a design with that in mind. So the two become one, become three, and that's how everything is born.
All right, and we're back. Another episode of Second Take.
Woo!
We're talking about renewal of community today.
Yes.
So we're going to be pulling out a couple clips here and kind of just diving a bit deeper into, I guess, what that means, what community is, how we can build it, how we're supposed to think about it. So I'll toss it over to you right away just to kind of get us started talking about, we kind of went through the renewal of heart, mind, body, soul, and then now we're kind of transitioning a little bit to something that maybe we need to think about a bit differently than those because other ones might have been a little bit more inward focused. Yeah. And now we're kind of branching out from that.
Community, it's at the core of who we are as people, right? I mean, it's so hard to conceive of ourselves as individuals outside of the key relationships we have, right? As a child, right? As a son or daughter, as a friend, as a coworker, as a spouse, parent, all these different relationship roles that we have, and we're interdependent people, right? Like we need relationships to survive, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally and spiritually too. So before we even talk about the church, that's our next service is renewal of the church. There's a renewal of community because God doesn't start with a church. God doesn't start with a nation. He doesn't start with a society. He starts with a man and a woman. And that's significant. God clearly had a design with that in mind. So the two become one, become three, and that's how everything is born. So community is essential to what it means to be a person. I feel like we've lost so much of what it means to be a person in community in our kind of individualistic age. And the danger is the danger of not recognizing the need or the necessity of community is it actually it makes you susceptible to abuse in community, right? Because you're not aware of the deep needs or longings you have that are fulfilled or the purpose you can play within community too. So
obviously we're talking about community today, but when it comes to thinking of ourselves as individuals or the idea of being individualistic, is there any place for that for us as Christians in our lives to think of ourselves as individuals or being individualistic?
Yeah, well, I believe Christianity is the smashing together, the holding together the tension between the communal and the individual. And I was blown away when I was in college and I had friends from China, Taiwan. Their last name is their first name, right? So their family name is actually their first name. What that means is their family identity is way more important than their individual identity. But in America, we're completely opposite. And you think about the people that make up America, pretty much all, except for the Native Americans, got on a boat and migrated here without any thought of ever going back. That's the underlying DNA of the United States of America. Whereas in Europe, it's centuries old, the communities there. But anyway, so Christianity holds together this idea that we're meant for community, while at the same time we're saved individually, right? So in the Old Testament, you have in Ezekiel, it's there's a proverb: the father eats sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. That's a weird saying, but basically the children are they're punished for the parents' sins. And what God says is no, that's not true. Each person is punished for their own sins. Each person is rewarded for their own behavior, kind of. So you see both the necessity of community as well as this, individual relationship with God. That God yearns for each individual to have a connection and a meaningful relationship with Him, while at the same time He's working together a larger community.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. So then kind of moving ahead to maybe kind of sort of what we're supposed to do. So I feel like anybody that's listening to this, they probably have some level of community, whether that be, friends, family, whatever. And like, where should the distinction be between kind of giving our time or focus or energy into trying to build new community with other people and make new connections versus spending that time and energy on the community that we already have to try and kind of like improve those relationships with those around us.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. And for me, like, that's why I appreciate talking to you. We come from different places, right? Like, so I have 4 humans that rely on me, and then I'm married. So there's 6 people that live in my house. Like, there's nothing I can do and I wouldn't want to get rid of those people in my life, right? And so I have this like built-in community that it's not negotiable. But for somebody without a spouse or children, they're working from home in a city where they don't, they moved there for college and now whatever. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of people out there, especially following COVID and all the isolation and lockdowns and remote work, who are wrestling with exactly what you're asking. Like, if I'm looking for community, where do I invest myself? I don't want to just like go to a random bar and try to meet people. And so I think the first step is paying attention to the people who are around you, right? Like noticing the people who are around you, starting to acknowledge the people who are around you. And I think it can start to become self-evident who those people are who are open to being connected in a meaningful way. But also, I think you'll find people who are actually looking to connect with you too. But oftentimes we're all looking at our phones and we're not looking for community. So I think once we start looking for community, it's much easier for us to find it. So where to invest ourselves? That's kind of your question. And I think there's as I process through that, I think there's really we all must have a capacity to deal with people that we don't want to be around, or like that don't fill us up, right? It's like we can't have everyone in our life is filling us up. That would be awesome, but it's not going to be reality. So we all have to have some capacity or bandwidth for those people who like they don't make us feel good, they don't fill us up, but we're there for them. Okay, and that's a community of love. Right? It's like, I'm going to love this person. It doesn't feel good, whatever, but I'm going to serve them. Right? Through love, serve one another. We talked about 1 John 3 in the service. But then there's also those people, and I think what we need to be intentionally building is those people who are pouring into us, right? Where we know that they are invested in us. Because each one of us is a valuable child of God. And we need to hear that from people, that we have gifts and abilities that are going to bless others, and they have something that's going to bless us. So I think the bigger thing is to look for those people who make you feel better, not like emotionally better, but like more capable or more able, more like stronger. Like they make you into a better person. And those are the kind of people you want to surround yourself with, because they're adding value to your life so that you can add value to the lives of others. So, yeah. And I think all of us have places where we can find those people. Maybe there's some that like they really don't, but at work, we all have some kind of social environment. And if we don't, man, go to the grocery store and greet the people at the checkout. Just like look up and go to the coffee shop and say hi to the barista. Like I think maybe there are some people that are that far separated right now from just like being a human, but you have community. We all have people. Go on. I guess there are online relationships too. You can establish online relationships, and the challenges with those is distance. We need that physical connection too. So. Does that help?
I think it does. Yeah, I think there's 2 questions there. Like, you're kind of answering how to think about or go about, like where you can look for community, or that it's kind of like the opportunity is all around you. But my question was sort of like especially in your instance where you said like there's 6 people that live in your house,
Yeah.
you have this built-in community. How do you? I guess maybe it just like kind of gets to the question of like work-life balance, where like how do you decide or determine how much of your time and energy should be spent like working on that community that you already have, like pouring time and attention into your wife, into your kids, into your parents, into your close friends, and how do you determine when like I need to do something more for other people, I need to reach out and make more connections, I need to be like I'm being called to like build new community, like bring new people in, offer things to new people versus the people that are already around you that you would consider to be a part of your community currently.
Yeah, okay, so I think part of it is we're all wired a little differently. Like there are some people that are completely content with the people they have around them. And then there are people who are always looking for new people. So my guess is you're one of the people who's a little more content with the crowd you have, but you're like also feel like you probably should be reaching out to new people.
For me personally,
Yeah.
I mean, probably. I feel like I would tend to skew more towards the being comfortable with the people around me, which I think whether or not other people that are listening to this are happy with the people around them, they default to the same thing because of the fact that they, for whatever reason, social anxiety
I don't think it has anything to do with happiness.
Yeah.
I think it has more to do with comfort.
Comfort.
Yeah. Because you can be very unhappy with the people around you, but comfortable.
And not do anything about it.
There's a lot of dysfunctional people who have that.
Yeah.
Or dysfunctional families, whatever. I think there's a wiring toward, I'm going to use these terms, but probably not in the way that most people understand them. Like conservatism in the sense of like preserving what you have, and then progressivism in the sense of meeting new or like making new things. So I think depending on which way you're wired, I think you just need to be aware of like what your heart is. Like I'm completely comfortable with the people in my life. What it does is it shuts you down from seeing potential new relationships. Like for me, I'm the opposite. Like I walk down the street and I keep my eyes up. Like I greet people as I walk down, and everyone else is on their phone. I was like, "Hey," and they're like,
"Who are you?
Right,
why are you looking at me?"
So I'm my buddy and I, we were in college. We'd walk down the hall and he'd be talking to me, and I'm looking out for other people. Like, "Hey, how's it going? Hey," and he doesn't say hi to anyone. He just keeps unbroken conversation for him with me. And I feel like in that moment we represented this distinction. So if you're the kind of person who's like always looking for the new thing, like, okay, take a moment and be with the people you are. But if you're somebody who's wired, like I'm comfortable with the people I am, just like in those settings, like how can you be more connected? And I think in terms of like work-life balance, being a person in community or in relationship, shows like The Office kind of like blend that work-life balance in like probably unhealthy ways, where everyone dates everyone and their lives are so enmeshed. But I mean, these people that you spend 40 hours a week with or whatever, they're worth getting to know. Ask them about their family, just have meaningful conversation. Have meaningful conversation. I think we can also get into ruts with our family. And I noticed this for myself too. It's like we have the same conversation. How often are you asking those personal questions to those that are closest to you? What's filling you up right now? What are your joys at work? How are your neighbors? I can't tell you all the questions to ask, but right, like, so I reflect sometimes like I wasn't asked one meaningful question, and sometimes when I am asked a meaningful question, I'm like guarded and I don't want to share. But like, paying attention, like who are the people who are asking me the meaningful questions, and after they ask them, they are still looking at me, because there's also those people like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And then they're like looking off to the crowd.
Yeah, they're already on to the next.
Oh, I'm good, and you clearly don't care whether I'm good or bad, So, I think being present for people is you'll kind of sort it out in your heart if you pay attention to your heart.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. It's kind of like I kind of said at the beginning, like it's going to come down to a balance between the two, and some people are more comfortable, in one direction or the other. But at the same time, like we're called to build these communities and not to be kind of passive in that,
Mm-hmm.
and not to, once you have your community, forget about it, push it off to the side. And like you said, always looking for the next new thing or the next,
Right.
person that's going to make you feel something. But at the same time, we are called to make connections with new people. So just kind of like figuring out that balance for ourselves, where that's kind of all going to fall.
I didn't expect to go here this morning. This is very practical, which is good. And I think it also highlights just like all of us live in a web of community. And love begets love. I mean, a loving community truly grows. It's inclusive. So if you have two people who really love each other, we'll just say as friends, like they care deeply about one another, that's a community that is naturally going to spin out and become inclusive of others. If it doesn't become inclusive, you know that it's not loving.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's like we're putting a border. Like marriage is an exclusive relationship. Okay, we can be clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage is an exclusive relationship, but there are some boundaries. All relationships have boundaries, but in a community that's centered in love, in 1 John 3, it's like, don't be like Cain, right? Cain was grounded in hate, and you see what hate does. It closes off, it kills people ultimately. But I believe a community of love, a community grounded in love, begets more love and is ready to include more people.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Can we play clip number 2 now that we're talking about communities grounded in love? Because that's what clip number 2 is.
Our community is based in love because it's based in Christ. So any community that doesn't find its anchor in Christ is not grounded in love. And we should be quick also to note that many communities which are grounded in Christ are also not grounded in love. The divorce rate among Christians isn't that much better than the world, right? Christian homes are still ending up with brokenness and pain, and children are being neglected and hurt and damaged. The Christian church doesn't always look that different. Even though, as John points out, we are putting forth a different kind of community. And how can we expect the world to embrace love when we who follow Jesus struggle so much?
So I kind of thought there's kind of 2 parts to what you're talking about there. And there's the idea that community needs to be, as Christians, needs to be anchored in Christ and then grounded in love. And you talk about how, we can have the anchored in Christ without the grounded in love. And I kind of wanted to talk about maybe like what does that look like almost? I guess I think pretty practically, because that's kind of like another practical question where it's like, okay, like that makes sense, but like, what does that really look like on a daily basis? Like, how do we, focus on how do we get to that end result where we have both of those things in our community?
Yeah, well, and that's why, at least for us, we started with the personal, right? And we grounded this in Deuteronomy 6, which is the great Shema, an orienting word for the Jewish people, as you look at the Old Testament, where God says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone." Okay, so the Lord is the center of all things, all relationships. And then you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your everything. And then after that, it goes into how to, it's like you shall tell your children about the Lord as you sit down, as you wake up. He shall put his word, his frontlets between your eyes. Some people probably use it as like permission for tattoos right there in Deuteronomy 6. But this orients us in the sense that we first find ourselves in relationship to God, and as we renew or direct our hearts and minds and souls and bodies toward God, it's going to have a huge implication on our relationships, right? So I think part of the problem is that many Christians aren't ready to embrace a life of renewal. Like they're kind of happy with the status quo, or they might not be happy, but they're not dissatisfied enough to change, if that makes sense. So that's where the problem comes when we relegate our relationship to God in one of the areas: heart, mind, body, soul. Right? So like, I love God with my mind. I know all the answers. I read my Bible so that I can be equipped with knowledge. Well, knowledge alone doesn't do it for you, Or I feel my relationship with God in my heart, and my heart directs me. Well, you might get yourself in some sticky situations there, right? Because your heart might lead you to also have pretty strong feelings for that other person when you shouldn't, when your mind has to say, I've made a commitment, and I have whatever, or I do yoga and I go for runs and I fish every weekend, and that's my spiritual time with God. It's like, well, is that enough really to renew you as a person? I don't think so. How is your mind growing? How are you allowing God to shape your thought life? So I think when people don't open themselves up to a holistic renewal, they're setting themselves up to fail in the relational realm. And not to say that it can't be reciprocal in the sense of like you find yourself in the midst of a community that's renewed, and those things start to change. C.S. Lewis said, if you want to make a man brave, put him with brave men. He won't start out brave, but he will become it, right? So I'm not saying that it has to be like you work on yourself and then you find yourself, like, you might need that great community. And that's why it's so important for us as Christians to have great community, like where we can welcome somebody in. It's like, well, they're not perfect. None of us are. They have a long way to go, but hey, come with us. We're heading somewhere great, and you're a great person. So there's a line I like to use every now and then. It's like, God created you at this time, in this place, with these people for his purpose. These people is kind of a big deal too, right? God chose your parents. God chose where you'd be born and who you'd interact with in your life. And so I think Christian communities get off when they get out of touch with the love of Christ when they start to focus on things other than Christ, right? So maybe they've made their mission social justice. Like, we got to make sure to stand up for the downtrodden. When that becomes more important than loving Jesus, that's a problem. Or we got to stand up for our individual rights. These might be two of the things in America right now that are kind of at war with each other in the church. But neither of those is really. We start with a love for Christ, and if our lives and our community is not based in that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So it sounds like, we have this maybe where the goal is this close knit, stronger, like, Christian community. Obviously, you can't build community with everybody because
Correct.
People are different. Not everybody wants to be a part of your community, and you don't necessarily want to be a part of their community. But in a world that is increasingly, not as religious, not like less Christian, I guess. How do we kind of like reach out and make better connections and like kind of extend community to those people? Because in listening to your message, it was making me think about in this specific section. I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. A community needs to be kind of anchored in Christ. But then when you connect that to grounded in love, I was thinking about how, there's plenty of people that have very different ideas of what love is and what love looks like. And as Christians, some of the ways in which we love people aren't always easy. Having difficult conversations with people, sharing truth with people is a lot of times uncomfortable, and we view that as this is a way in which I'm loving you, but a lot of the world views that as not that. So how do we approach that? How do we kind of like use this model to extend community maybe to people that aren't going to be as receptive to it as those that are kind of like in the Christian model or the Christian thought space.
Yeah, so Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I don't know if I mentioned it in this sermon
You
or
did
not.
quote
him. How we need to look at others through the spirit of Christ or the spirit of desire. And that is orienting for us. We talk about what would Jesus do? It used to be a thing that people would put on wristband. I don't know if they still do that or not. I don't know.
Last time I saw one, I think I was in 3rd grade.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Some people probably still
It was
learn.
a fad.
Yeah.
WWJD. Yeah. Maybe it's a hashtag. Look up how many hashtags there are for WWJD. Okay, Ethan's on it. But if we truly submit our relationships to Christ, we're like, I want to see this person through your eyes, Jesus. What is that? It removes all pretension, right? It removes all selfishness from our hearts. All of the desires we have for that person are gone, right? When we say, God, I want to see this person through you because they are your child. They are your creation. So it removes that sense of I'm needing to prove something to myself or to them through my abilities. It's like, well, this isn't about me. Right? You take out that part of the equation, and now you can actually fully love this person. I don't need to prove anything to them or myself. So what would that look like? Well, Jesus hung out with people who are far from the church, but he didn't engage in sin. So what did that look like for him? It meant he was able to be around people who were far from God, or maybe far from God is the wrong way of saying it. Far from the norms and relationships that we would anticipate or expect. He was comfortable being in their presence because he knew their deepest desires and needs and longings were for a meaningful community, and for the love of God. So if we can start to see people long for meaningful connections, and they ultimately in that longing, they're longing for God. So how can we, in the midst of that, orient ourselves to see how God might be present for this person right now, and be utilizing us to be present in this time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it. You can let me know your thoughts on it, but it's almost kind of like we were talking about in the beginning, trying to find a balance between investing in our own community and the people around us, maybe in our Christian community, and reaching out to new people and making new connections. I guess I almost see it as you really need that base in the Christian community to kind of hold you and everybody rock solid together, being this is what we believe, this is who we are, this is who God's called us to be, and then kind of reach out from there to make new connections. Because I feel if you don't have that, even as a Christian, if you don't have that basis of community with people who are constantly being a good example for you, supporting you, caring for you in sort of a faith sense, the more you reach out to the rest of the world and kind of just get beat up for it. If you don't have that community that you're also a part of, that you can either fall back on or have as that support system, I could see that as being a real struggle if you just consistently are trying to kind of reach out to the world, even with good intentions as a good-hearted Christian. If you don't have that base, that it becomes increasingly difficult, or what's the word I'm looking for? It just makes you feel really beat down or downtrodden.
And as you say that, I do want to clarify, we are not even talking about the church yet, right? That's why the role of parents is so important. And any parent listening to this, do not underestimate your role as a significant force in the life of your children, especially as young children, but even as adults, right? Now, as parents, I'm clearly not there. My oldest is 9, but I think parenting adult sons and daughters is challenging because now they're your peers, right? Most parents probably work with people that are younger than their kids. And if you take a moment to okay, well, I work with these people, they're professionals in my business, and do I treat my children with the same respect that I treat these people? because chances are your children might actually be more, at a greater level of responsibility or whatever in their lives, but if you're still orienting yourselves to your children as children, you're making it hard for them to feel, built up and encouraged. So in John Gottman, I think I talked about him as well in the sermon. He highlights three key relationships. First is husband-wife. Second is adult children with their parents, and the third is adult sibling relationships. They're all close, so close to who we are, right? And even Cain and Abel, right? Brothers trying to figure out life as adults, because you kind of, as children, it's important for parents to kind of direct their children to love each other and be there for each other, but then also give them the opportunity as adults to rediscover who they are. Because just how much you've changed since you were 16, right? Or 12, 14. But you can keep those same narratives and those same scripts for your siblings. Right? They're just like who they were back then. They're just that arrogant little whatever, or they're always trying to compete with me, or they're just making fun of me. It's, well, we've come a long way since our teenage years. And so I think having a solid foundation of family, it's a game changer. The number one signal for a healthy child is two parents in the home. His two parents or her two parents in the home. That's the number one. Not saying that no one turns out of it. They don't have, they're two biological parents in the home, but it's a huge deal. So I forgot your initial question now.
I'm just I'm listening. I'm trying to remember what was my question. I'm too busy listening to you and trying to think of what's
community with a foundation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So also from that parenting role, you also have mentoring, right? It's why it's so important if you're in a mentoring role to see the value of that, or to find people who are going to pour into you in that way. I mean, we need to be there for each other in meaningful ways.
Yeah. Well, I've got a note here to answer your question. WWJD, 326,000.
That's not that many.
It's really not. We should increase that. If you're listening to this,
Hashtag WWJD.
hashtag WWJD.
All your
on
friends
Instagram.
will be like, what is WWJD?
What is that? Well, we're doing pretty good here. I had 4 clips. We've already talked about 2 of them, so I'm not going to go back and play those again. So we hit those.
Cool.
I guess I'm picking good clips.
There we go.
But why don't let's play the last clip here, clip number 4.
You have something that other people need. It might not be money. Maybe it is. I don't know. But you have something that other people need. It might be kindness. It might be, you're baking. I don't know. But you have the love and affection and attention that someone else needs. You might be asking, how do I find meaningful community? Well, maybe you're the one to bring that meaningful community to others. By seeing the needs, the deep pain and hurt of rejection that somebody might have, right? And instead of closing off our hearts, right? Instead of protecting or guarding ourselves from the risk of relationship, we see the opportunity as Christians to renew the hearts and souls and bodies and minds of others in our communities.
So we kind of touched on that just a little bit earlier on, but I kind of wanted to pair that with, so you talked about, actually in the beginning of your message, kind of when you were talking about, being individualistic, you talked a little bit about disconnection, loneliness, anxiety, and I kind of wanted to pair that conversation with kind of this conversation more towards the end of the message, where how, when people are feeling that way, when they're feeling too kind of maybe inward focused, or they're living their lives in an individualistic way, and maybe they're struggling with anxiety or loneliness or something like that, what can they do to kind of get to this point where they feel like they, I don't know, maybe even know what it is that they have to offer? Because that sounds good, and it feels good to hear you have something to offer, there's something that you have
pep talk
that other people need, and people are wow, that feels good, but then they're oh, but I don't really know, what do I even have to offer? How do they, I don't know, where do they go from there?
Yeah, being a pastor is pretty cool. because there's so many opportunities like that baked in to my job, right? Like there's a preschool, and I give kids high fives, and they're like thrilled. Like, it's pretty simple to give a kid a high five, to acknowledge a child, and just, yeah, I think that's a pretty. So if you have children in your life, acknowledging them in their childlikeness, in their childhood, and getting down on their level, looking them in the eyes, being willing to play with them. Even as a parent, it's like it's so easy to not engage in play, but we are creatures of play, right? So I think that would be an easy way to say, if you have children in your life, find you have somebody to play with, right? And they need play. And even as adults, we need play, right? So I don't know, join a bowling league? No, no one does that. But I just learned what spike ball is. So last week. Have you ever played spike ball?
I play a lot of spike ball.
I can see that.
I play a lot of spike ball.
I had no idea the rules or all these things, and it's, I don't know if I can get into it. I think I might be.
Are you pretty coordinated?
I believe I am.
Oh.
I did a dizzy bat spin thing not that long ago.
Oh, I did see that, yeah. Isn't that on Instagram, Facebook?
We'll insert that clip here.
We'll insert that clip.
We'll Instagram it. Look for that clip. Pastor Luhman doing the bat spin.
And I did spin. I feel like I spun twice as fast as my competitor, although she beat me in the race. I feel like I beat her in RPMs.
I think the picture that was posted shows you going the complete at a 90-degree angle in the wrong direction.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I fell, and then I got up, and I still couldn't run straight after I fell. Yeah, it took me a little while to get my orientation. I talked to somebody yesterday. They said they got a concussion from the dizzy bat spin. They fell so hard. Yeah.
So they're not very coordinated, I guess.
Right. So I would say, all things considered, yeah, probably. So anyway, how to like discover that within yourself? I think that honestly, I think that's going too far. How do you discover this? It's not that big of a deal, right? And it's so often the little things which fill us up. I don't know, just it could be as simple as when you're buying your cup of coffee, paying a compliment to the barista. That's a really cool shirt you have, or I like your hairdo. Whatever. Like, what does your tattoo mean? I think we try to make community a bigger deal than it is, and then it feels insurmountable. And I think that's part of the problem. Is like, also we're looking for things that are going to pour back into us.
Well, there's a lot of small steps that you can take. I think is kind of what you're saying, is that it's not this, massive. You don't have to just jump from where you are right now to like, it's like something that's going to feel super deep, or like you said, kind of like fill you up completely. It's just taking those like little small steps or small gestures that like makes a big deal for other people, and also like, I don't know, instills confidence in you too, to like feel comfortable making these connections, because not everybody is comfortable naturally making those connections.
There's a proverb. It's like one takes and's left with nothing, and another gives and has all the more. And Jesus says, or actually, Paul quotes Jesus, although you don't read this in Jesus' words, but I forget where it is in Paul's letter. He says, as the Lord said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. But we're all into receiving, But Jesus reorients us to say, well, freely you have received, so freely give. How can you be giving? And what we find, and what the social scientists show over and over and over again, you're actually more grounded in happiness and joy when you're able to find ways to give to others, right? So how can you give to those that you're connected to? How can you give back? Stop expecting so much from everyone else. I think we have such high expectations of everyone else, and it kills us inside because we realize that we wouldn't even live up to our own expectations. Like, I'd be a bad friend to myself if I expect, but we don't play that self-reflection game enough. So, be the type of person you're expecting other people to be. Maybe that'd be a good start. And just find the joy in being a human.
Yeah, I think that's the good, like, kind of like practical takeaway, I guess, is that, like, if you're listening to this, whether you feel like you do or not, like, you have something to give and there's something that you have that other people need. So don't be afraid or scared to give.
Well, the reality is there's no one else in your position.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no one else in your shoes doing your life. So it really is true that each of us has been created by God to be in the place we are, and from that place to love others. So I'm sure that everyone has something on their heart that they could do better, and maybe not better, but maybe better is the wrong conception in the sense of love isn't necessarily about better and worse so much as giving more of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's in your marriage, you've been like holding out on your spouse, right? Like, they don't say nice things to me, so I don't say nice things to them. Or they don't text me enough, so I'm not going to text that. However we can get embittered in that regard. But just to shake that and say, no, this person needs my love. I'm going to love them. Or I think finding time to be away from our phones with those people that are close to us. I'm just going to be a parent right now, and or whatever it is. So
yeah, you're talking about phones reminds me. I was watching, I think it was like a TED Talk or something the other day. Don't even remember, no idea who the guy was, but he was talking about kind of just like the power of like even just your phone being visible. Like when you're having a conversation with someone and you have your phone in your hand and you're talking to them. Yeah, you just got your phone sitting on the desk there. Or just like like he was talking about, like when you're at dinner or whatever, you're out to eat, just as much as like setting the phone on the table like this, unconsciously sends a huge message to everybody else with you that like we're having eye contact, we're having a conversation, I feel very engaged, but also at the same time, if anything happens, this is right here, like in case, I need it here because like maybe I'll get a text, maybe it'll be a phone call that like
I can see
this
that.
could be more important. And just like it sends a subconscious message.
Well,
whether or not you agree with that, like I thought that was super powerful in that like, like it I think it means something, it has some level of impact.
I do that sometimes, but I turn my phone upside down and I actually do it to do the opposite, to say like, this is not in my pocket. There's nothing hidden.
Okay.
You know that this distraction is out, but maybe what I need to do is like chuck it behind me and leave it at a table opposite,
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the more sneaky one is like the lean back and look down at your phone and from your pocket. So
yeah, that's
also
why
I'm trying to keep the rays off me,
Yeah.
protect myself from
the radiation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The gamma. No,
whatever. All the radiation.
That's gonna make me an X-Man or
whatever it is. But all right, well maybe we can debate next time about where we keep our phones in social situations. But I think we're just about out of time here. So yeah, thanks for everybody for tuning in, digging a little bit deeper into Renewal of Community. Let's see, what do we have next? We got Renewal of the Church, I think you said. Right?
Yeah.
Coming up next? Yeah.
Yep.
Next is going to be Renewal of the Church. So keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions, comments, things you want us to talk about on the podcast, ideas for sermon series, whatever it might be, send them our way. Send us a DM on Instagram, Facebook. Leave a comment on any of our stuff. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Second Take, a deeper dive into sermons from firstmin.church with Pastor Ethan Luhman and cameraman Nick. Connect with us whenever and wherever you are. Just search firstmin.church on all your social platforms or head to our website, firstmin.church, for more ways to connect and serve. Thanks, and catch you next time.